The arena erupted into a cacophony of gasps and whispers the moment the Alpha King knelt. Every eye in the chamber turned to the trembling Omega, her hands slick with spilled wine, her tray shattered at her feet. She froze, chest tight, as though the entire hall had pressed against her ribs, suffocating her. All her life, she had been invisible, a shadow at the edges of grandeur, mocked and scorned for her weakness. And now, every gaze, some curious, some incredulous, most scornful, was fixed on her. Elara Thrynn had always known the sting of ridicule. Born an Omega in the Bloodcrest pack, she had been marked from childhood as lesser. Other wolves had called her Broken Wolf, a nickname that clung to her skin like a curse. Her silver crescent-shaped birthmark, faint and almost invisible, had been mocked as a sign of frailty. She could not fully shift, her attempts at strength or speed always ended in failure, humiliation, or both. She had learned early to keep her head low, her voice quiet, her presence insignificant. Yet now, with the Alpha King kneeling before her, bowing with an authority that silenced even the noblest alphas, something within her trembled, a spark of disbelief, awe, and fear intermingled so fiercely she could hardly breathe. She tried to step back, but the gold-flecked marble floor seemed to grip her feet. Her heart thumped in her ears, echoing the steady drum of the king's wolf growls from the shadows behind him. Every instinct screamed to flee, to disappear, to hide in the shadows where she belonged. But she could not. The weight of expectation, though unasked for, pressed her to stand still. The king's gaze was intense, molten with authority and something else she could not name. He was Thrynn, sovereign of the northern clans, a figure of regal intimidation and unmatched power. His presence alone made even the highest-ranking alphas bow their heads slightly, yet here he was, kneeling before her as though she were royalty herself. Elara's hands shook, and when she raised her eyes, she caught the reflection of her own fear in the polished obsidian floor. It was a reflection she had longed to escape, but could not. She was no one. And yet, here he was, kneeling. You. Kalian's voice was low, rumbling, and resonant enough to make the hall still. Rise, my queen. Elara froze, disbelief choking her throat. The word alone was dangerous. Queen. Not Omega. Not servant. Not weakling. Queen. And it sounded as if it carried a weight beyond the walls themselves. Her first instinct was to deny it. She opened her mouth to speak, to tell him he was mistaken, but the crowd had already erupted. The nobles shouted accusations, the future Luna of the Bloodcrest pack, tall, elegant, cruel, stepped forward with a condescending curl of her lips. He must be mistaken, she hissed. This creature is nothing. Elara's pulse quickened, but beneath the fear, a subtle current of defiance stirred. She had endured endless mockery, ridicule, and isolation. She had survived the harsh winters when food was scarce, when stronger wolves would push her aside. She had learned to endure, to hide her true strength because revealing it only invited more torment. And now she had the king's attention. A king whose power could crush nations with a thought. A king who knelt before her. Her fingers brushed the silver crescent mark on her wrist. It glimmered faintly, responding to the rising tension, as if it, too, recognized the moment's significance. She could feel the power coiled beneath her skin, dormant but impatient, stirring at the recognition of her destiny. She swallowed hard. She would not cry. Not now. Not in front of the entire pack. Not in front of Kalian Thrynn. The hall was a storm of chaos. Nobles cried treachery, accusing the king of folly. Guards whispered nervously, unsure whether to intervene or wait. The future Luna's gaze burned into her, a mix of jealousy and terror. This is impossible, she spat. You are no one. Just an Omega. Elara's lips pressed into a thin line. No. She was more than that. Every whispered insult, every mocking glance, every harsh word she had endured had led to this moment. The king's wolf growled again, low and resonant, and something in her stirred, raw and instinctive. Her pulse thumped like a drum in her ears. She could feel the silver blood beneath her skin reacting, pulsing toward the surface with a heat that made her breath catch. The shards of glass at her feet glimmered, catching the torchlight in jagged flashes. She had never been chosen. She had never been wanted. She had never mattered. And yet here she was, trembling but alive, watched by the most powerful alpha in the land, and perhaps, for the first time, she felt the faintest spark of belonging. Elara's knees felt weak, though she stood. The whispers swirled like a storm around her, sharp and slicing. Every noble present had a voice, and every voice seemed to cut deeper than the last. Yet Kalian Vrwenen remained kneeling, a mountain of calm in the chaos. The weight of his presence pressed down, and it was terrifying. The king's wolf circled him, massive and silver-eyed, growling at anyone who dared step too close. The sound was a warning, an unspoken command, a herald of power. The future Luna, Elara Thrynn, stepped forward, her slender frame deceptively delicate. Her emerald eyes glittered with venom. "This is absurd," she hissed, voice trembling only with suppressed rage. "The king. He cannot mean this. This Omega, this weakling, cannot be a queen." Elara's throat tightened, and for a moment, she wanted to vanish. She had learned the hard way that anger or defiance drew attention, and attention always brought pain. But something in her stirred. Something raw, unyielding, that refused to be crushed any longer. Her hand brushed her silver crescent mark, and she could feel the faint heat beneath her skin, like embers waking to flame. Kalian's voice cut through the hall, low and unwavering. "She is the one I seek. No other holds the mark of the moon-bound queen." The words echoed like thunder. The title itself, long thought to be myth, made the chamber shiver. A queen bound by Moonfire, lost centuries ago, whose bloodline was extinguished, or so history claimed. Prophecy whispered of her return in times of upheaval, when the northern kingdoms teetered on the edge of war. And here she stood, trembling, a servant Omega, suddenly central to the fate of nations. Elara wanted to protest, to tell him it was a mistake, but her voice caught in her throat. Instead, she swallowed and stared at the floor, aware of every accusing gaze. The nobles were muttering now, their fear and disbelief barely concealed. Some were frightened, some enraged. And some were plotting. Elara's face twisted, lips curling in a sneer. "You think a fragile Omega can carry the weight of a kingdom?" She spat. "You are deluded, king. You have chosen a servant over the daughters of noble houses, over strength, over blood. She cannot even shift properly." Elara's fingers clenched. The insult cut deeper than any blow she had ever suffered. Her shifting had always been a point of shame, the visible proof of weakness. She had trained in secret, in the dead of night, when no one watched, to strengthen herself. She had failed. Again and again. And yet, now, the king's choice ignored all that history, all that failure. Her pulse throbbed, a rhythm of fear and burgeoning power. Something she had never dared to acknowledge simmered beneath her skin. The silver crescent on her wrist glimmered faintly, and she felt a whisper in her mind, soft, ancient, and commanding, "Rise." Her eyes lifted slowly. For the first time, she met Kalian's gaze. The hall seemed to hold its breath. He was watching her, not as a weak Omega, not as an object of pity, but with the weight of knowledge and authority. His dark eyes seemed to look into her very bones, unearthing something hidden and powerful. "You have doubted yourself all your life," Kalian said, his voice calm but carrying a force that made the air tremble. "But your strength has been hidden, not absent. The moon-bound queen is not measured by the ease of her beginnings but by the fire she awakens within herself. Elara's throat ached, tears pricking her eyes. She had endured humiliation, neglect, and mockery for so long that the concept of being chosen, of being wanted, was alien. Her voice, when it emerged, was a whisper at first. I am no one. I am not ready. The king's gaze did not waver. None are ready when the world demands them. Strength comes in moments such as this. His hand gestured slightly toward the crowd, and the nobles faltered under his commanding presence. Even Elara seemed momentarily unnerved. Whispers of disbelief filled the hall, but the tension was now more than social, it carried the weight of prophecy. Elara could feel it, the currents of destiny threading through her veins. The story her dreams had whispered, the voice that called her moon-bound queen, was real. And yet fear lingered. She had been weak all her life. Could she truly rise to meet the mantle thrust upon her? The murmurs escalated into open objections. This cannot be. She is too fragile. One noble cried. Another shook his head in disbelief, muttering, "It is an insult to every house represented here." Elara's voice cut like a blade. "You will regret this, Kalian. She is nothing. She cannot even." Her words faltered as the king's wolf bared its fangs, growling low, warning her to cease. The hall fell into an uneasy silence. Elara's chest heaved, fear and anger colliding. She clenched her fists, feeling the faint glow of silver against her skin. The fire inside her, long dormant, stirred at the edges, responding to the challenge, the threat, the injustice. For the first time, she felt that power within reach, waiting for the courage to claim it. "You may mock me," she said quietly, but firmly, voice trembling yet resolute. "But you will not control me. I will not be afraid." The hall froze. Even Elara stepped back, caught off guard by the conviction in the Omega she had always deemed weak. The king's eyes gleamed with approval, subtle but unmistakable. His presence was magnetic, drawing the attention of all who watched, binding their focus on her trembling form. And in that instant, Elara understood, she could no longer hide. To survive, and to embrace what destiny demanded, she would need to confront not just the doubts of others, but the doubts that had lived inside her entire life. Elara barely registered the uproar around her as Kalian straightened, towering above the nobles who dared murmur against his decision. His dark eyes never left hers, burning with authority and expectation, and something in that gaze made the chaos fade into a distant hum. The king's wolf circled them once, low growl vibrating through the floor, and Elara felt the weight of his approval, terrifying and comforting all at once. She had never felt so exposed, and yet, so seen. "You will not be coddled, Elara Thrynn," Kalian said, voice slicing through the hall. "You will be tested." Her heart skipped a beat. Tested? She had spent her life avoiding notice, avoiding danger, avoiding shame. The very idea of being scrutinized by him, by the entire northern realm, was terrifying. Her legs felt like lead, but she forced herself to stand taller. She would not stumble. Not here. Not now. Elara Thrynn, the future Luna, stepped forward again, her expression twisted with a mix of fear and fury. "You will regret this, King. She is an Omega, weak, incapable. If you place your trust in her, the northern clans will crumble." Elara swallowed hard, fists clenching at her sides. Her voice shook, but she found the courage to answer. "You think I am nothing because you have chosen to see me as nothing. But you are wrong." A tense silence fell over the hall. Every eye was on her, as if waiting for the words to fail her, for the truth of her weakness to be exposed. Yet in that moment, something deep inside stirred. Her birthmark glimmered faintly under the torchlight, a silver crescent pulsating like a heartbeat. The fire in her veins, long dormant, edged closer to the surface, hungry for recognition. Kalian stepped closer, and she could feel the raw power radiating from him. It was suffocating, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. The path ahead is not easy, he warned. You will face enemies, betrayal, and danger. But those who endure are the ones who rise. Before she could respond, a sudden commotion erupted at the rear of the hall. A guard tripped and fell with a clatter, and a volley of poisoned arrows shot from the shadows. Chaos erupted instantly. Nobles screamed, scrambling for cover. The torchlight flickered as the assailants revealed themselves, masked and cloaked in black. Elara's first instinct was to flee. Her pulse raced, and her wolf instincts screamed at her to run. But then she felt Kalian's hand on her shoulder, steady and grounding. His presence, the silent confidence in his gaze, anchored her. Do not fear, he said quietly. You can face this. The first arrow struck the wall inches from her head. Instinct surged. She felt the power beneath her skin awaken fully for the first time. Her silver mark glowed fiercely, warmth crawling through her veins like wildfire. The air around her shimmered, and the arrows faltered, slowing as if caught in some invisible force. Elara's breath came in sharp bursts, heart hammering, as she realized, this was her power. This fire, this strength, had always been hers, hidden and restrained, but never gone. The assailants faltered, unnerved by the glow radiating from her. She raised her hands instinctively, and a surge of energy erupted outward, throwing the attackers back with a wave of silver light. Gasps filled the hall. Nobles fell silent, watching as the faint glow from her birthmark expanded, dancing along her arms, illuminating her in an ethereal silver light. The king's wolf barked, a deep, commanding sound that echoed in harmony with her power. For the first time, Elara felt the thrill of dominance, the power to defend herself, the power to command attention, the power to be more than what the world had always told her she was. Solara's face drained of color as she backed away, fear mingling with disbelief. What? What is this? She whispered, voice trembling. You, Kalian said, his tone unyielding, are the moon-bound queen. The one who will unite the northern clans and bring balance to the realm. And you will not be defeated. Elara's legs trembled, but she forced herself to stand tall. The hall had fallen into stunned silence, and she could hear the whispers of prophecy circling her name. The silver light curled along her arms like liquid moonlight, and in that moment, she understood that this power was hers alone to wield. Not for the approval of nobles, not for the praise of kings, not even for Solara's envy. Hers. Her gaze met Kalian's, and for the first time, she did not feel small, terrified, or weak. She felt ready. Not fully prepared, not unafraid, but ready. The fire coursing through her veins demanded recognition, demanded action, demanded respect. You will not break me, she said aloud, her voice firmer now, echoing through the chamber. Not fear, not enemies, not even death. Kalian inclined his head slightly, approval shining in his dark eyes. Good. That is the spirit of a queen. The hall, once chaotic and loud, now seemed to hold its breath. Even the attacking shadows had disappeared, retreating into the corners from which they had emerged. The nobles exchanged looks of fear and awe. The future Luna, Elara, now stood frozen, realization dawning on her face that the Omega she had always mocked could not be dismissed so easily. Elara's chest heaved, still trembling with adrenaline and fear, but the glow of the silver light had faded to a soft shimmer, leaving only the strength that pulsed beneath her skin. For the first time, she did not want to hide. For the first time, she did not feel powerless. For the first time, she understood that she had been chosen not by chance, but by destiny. And she would rise to meet it. The chamber had grown silent, thick with tension, every gaze fixed on Elara Thrynn. Her hands trembled slightly, but her chest heaved with a steadying rhythm. The silver mark on her wrist pulsed softly, a quiet reminder that the fire within her had not diminished. Kalian Vrwenen stood beside her, a silent pillar of power and authority, his dark eyes watching her every move, waiting for the moment when she would claim herself fully. Elara Thrynn stepped forward, her posture rigid, jaw tight, and eyes ablaze with envy and disbelief. "You think you can command the northern clans?" she hissed. "A fragile Omega? You are nothing, a shadow." Elara's lips pressed into a thin line. The words stung, but she drew strength from every moment she had ever been mocked, ignored, and underestimated. Her silver crescent glimmered, and she felt the ancient power pulse in her veins, eager and relentless. She lifted her chin, meeting Elara's gaze with unwavering defiance. "I am no shadow," she said, voice steady. "I am the moon-bound queen. And you will learn to respect that." The tension cracked like ice. The nobles held their breath, watching as the once mocked Omega straightened, shoulders back, eyes shining with an unearthly light. The king's wolf growled, deep and resonant, circling them in a protective pattern, and the hall seemed to tremble with the raw energy of anticipation. Then, as if responding to the fire within her, Elara felt her body shift. Not a small, awkward transformation as before, but a surge of power unlike anything she had ever experienced. Her wolf form erupted with silver fur that glimmered like moonlight on snow, eyes alight with luminous silver, muscles coiled with strength she had never known. The floor beneath her seemed to hum, resonating with the force of her presence. Elara stumbled back, fear finally breaking through her arrogance. "Impossible. She can't." Elara's voice cut through the hall, clear and commanding. "I am not what you believe me to be." With a sweep of her silver-clawed paw, a wave of radiant moonfire shot across the chamber, washing over the nobles, freezing them in awe and fear. The torchlight flickered and bent around her, as if bowing to the raw force she now radiated. The very air vibrated with the intensity of her transformation, a power long thought lost, reclaimed at last. Kalian stepped closer, his presence steadying her, yet he did not touch her. "This is only the beginning," he murmured, a rare hint of admiration in his voice. "Your enemies will come, your path will be tested, but you are ready." Elara's ears twitched, senses heightening. She could feel every whisper, every heartbeat, every flicker of movement around her. She had been trained to survive, to endure, and now she could command, not merely endure, the world around her. "I accept my destiny," she said, the words carrying authority, power, and undeniable truth. "I accept my throne, my power, and my place beside the king." Elara's hands trembled as she reached toward her own wolf form, but hesitation rooted her in place. The future Luna had always been the image of dominance and grace among the blood-crest nobles, but now she realized that the throne she had coveted for herself was beyond reach. Elara's presence eclipsed her, radiant and unstoppable. The nobles murmured, awe and fear mingling in their voices. "The moon-bound queen. She is real," one whispered. "The prophecy. She has awakened." Elara shifted back to her human form, the silver light fading to a soft glow along her arms. She was no longer the timid, ridiculed Omega who had shuffled through these halls in silence. She stood tall, every inch of her radiating power and confidence, the weight of her destiny no longer a burden but a mantle she had claimed. Kalian's dark eyes met hers, and for a fleeting moment, a quiet acknowledgement passed between them. No words were necessary. They had been tested, their fates intertwined. Together, they would command the northern clans, together they would face the storms to come. But even as she allowed herself a brief moment of triumph, a shadow fell across the chamber. A messenger, breathless and panicked, pushed through the crowd, holding a scroll sealed with crimson wax. "Your Majesty," the messenger gasped, addressing Kalian, the southern kingdom. "They march. They know she has awakened. They seek to claim the moon-bound queen by force. A cold wave of apprehension washed over the hall. The nobles froze, whispers tumbling over one another, but Elara's eyes met Calian's, and the silver fire in her gaze flared brighter. She had risen from mockery, survived danger, and awakened her true power. Nothing could break her now. Calian's expression darkened, lips pressing into a hard line. Then we prepare, he said, voice low and dangerous. Let them come. She will not be taken. Elara's chest heaved with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Her power, her destiny, her choice, all converged in that instant. She could feel the pulse of the moon-bound bloodline coursing through her veins, each heartbeat resonating with the promise of strength and justice. Her gaze swept the chamber, settling finally on Elara. The former Luna's arrogance had crumbled, replaced with fear, envy, and a grudging respect. Remember this, Elara said softly, yet every noble present could hear the steel in her voice. I am no longer the Omega you despised. I am the Queen. And I will rise to meet whatever comes. The torches flickered, casting dancing shadows along the walls, but the glow from Elara's silver mark remained steadfast, a beacon of unyielding power. The hall was quiet now, tense with the weight of prophecy and the inevitability of what was to come. With Calian at her side, Elara stepped forward, her movements confident, every step resonating with authority. The northern clans had witnessed the rise of the moon-bound queen, and no one, either noble, enemy, nor rival, could deny the truth of her power. And beyond the walls, across the frozen northern expanse, the southern armies were already moving. Their swords, their strategy, their intent, they would test her again. But this time, Elara Thrynn would not be the weak, ridiculed Omega of the past. She was the queen the Alpha King chose. She was Moonfire incarnate. She was unstoppable. The hall fell silent, heavy with awe and anticipation, and in that moment, Elara's silver eyes flared one last time, burning with defiance, promise, and power. She whispered under her breath, just for herself, yet the words carried like a vow across the northern realm. Let them come.